Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, December 26th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Rose Bowl game against Oregon is in 6 days. The game against Michigan in 338 days. Today, we're going to be talking about the Buckeyes offense and what went right against Tennessee. And that's pretty much it. Not much went wrong against Tennessee, especially on the offensive side of the ball. We're going to be doing it with our buddy Ross Fulton, the X's and O's guru at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And when Ross is on the show, we're sponsored by Jeff Ruby's of Columbus, proudly offering nationally acclaimed USDA prime steaks, seafood and sushi, impeccable service, live entertainment, and an attention to detail that is simply unmatched. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus to check out the menu and make a reservation for today. All right, Ross, we're going to start with the wide receiver screen game. This is something we've talked about before. This is just a numbers game for Ohio State, and it is a numbers game that they have been working pretty effectively this year.
Yeah, so this is the first play of the game, but it tells us a lot about what was going to be going on, right? So when we talked about Tennessee last week, we discussed Tennessee's been principally a middle of the field closed team. They run a lot of cover 3 and cover 1. However, Michigan obviously had success against Ohio State with a lot of split safety, quarter, half, or, we talked about like even the Zeus concept where they basically roll cover 2 to Jeremiah Smith's side, to effectively double him, right? And so kind of the question coming in is like, which way is Tennessee going to go? The plan for them clearly was to try to emulate Michigan as much as they can. I think, as we will discuss here, the downside of that for a team, when we talk about this, right? Like how much can you just copy what another team does? Like you don't necessarily have the answers built in or like the intricacies in it. And that came back to bite Tennessee here. Because they just didn't have the ability to like run that kind of like Zeus concept. Like we're automatically going to go cover 2 to Smith's side, cover 4 opposite. But also, once you've seen it and you've had issues with it, like Ohio State had lots of answers, right? And so we see that right away. So first play, they go 12 personnel. So they ran a lot of 2 tight ends against Tennessee because we talked about going in. Tennessee likes to play a 4-3 in response. They motion Will Kazmarek over and to go to trips into the boundary. And they have Jeremiah Smith singled up to the opposite side of the field. So again, like here right away, they're expecting this Michigan. We're going to play basically a cover 2 cloud to Smith's side, giving us cover 4 opposite it. And so then they just as you said, it's just a numbers game. Will Howard is reading the backside Will linebacker. They leave, it's just an inside zone play, leave James Pierce, the backside defensive end, unblocked. And since the Will linebacker stays there, you get the now screen to the boundary. And so early on, we just see lots of answers prepared against quarter, half, or sometimes called cover 6. And that, as we'll discuss here, quickly chased Tennessee out of trying to do this. As I said, sort of their best imitation of Michigan as much as they could. But the problems that Ohio State had against Michigan in terms of not having answers for it, they had plenty of answers ready to go quickly.
And the next one of those answers was using Travion Henderson out of the backfield in the passing game. Now, I know you just said you can't just look at what other teams did and just copy it and Control-C, Control-V the game plan and dust your hands off and take a week off. But this is something that we saw Penn State have some success with, not this exact concept, but using running backs in the passing game against Oregon. So you wonder how much this might, Travion Henderson in the pass game apply for the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, I think one thing, like as a general matter, I know Manuel Excel, obviously a great follow on Blue Sky, talks about this a lot. College defensive coordinators are just not really adept at covering running backs out of the backfield. Like they just sort of the default expectation is that you're getting a 6-man protection scheme and the back is maybe a check down at best. And in fact, one thing Chip Kelly said last week going into this game was, one of his regrets against Michigan a few times, particularly like on the second Will Howard interception, was that they were in a 7-man pass protection scheme and he just didn't have a lot of options available. And in this game, you saw a lot more 5-man pass concepts where you're getting the back out immediately. Now, they did change it up. You still saw more play action as well and pulling guards. And, so they gave them a lot of pass protection looks. But right away, obviously, it was another point of emphasis to use the running backs in the passing game. And so, again, like here we go. Like Tennessee's again in quarter half. And this is a formation that I will show you a lot here. This is an open trips look, but the single receiver to the bottom is the tight end, G. Scott. So you have Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, Cardinal Tate all to the same side. Again, this is a response in effect to what Michigan wanted to do, right? Where they wanted to roll coverage to Jeremiah Smith. And so now you're putting all three wide receivers to the same side. This messes a lot with how teams, because you tend to, the default with trips is you tend to have your like number one receiver opposite that. Like Jeremiah Smith, in Ohio State's base open trips look would be the single wide receiver to the bottom. But instead you're putting all three of those guys together. And so, what Tennessee wants to do to that, like they again they're running cover 4 to the field. It looks like in cover 2 to the boundary, right? Like standard quarter half. And what a lot of teams will do then is they'll man up that single receiver side, particularly if you think your corner can handle it, because then you can push the coverage to the trip side. But they take advantage of that. So they use this little quick motion, right? And TreVeyon Henderson basically runs a wheel. And I think there's both a bust on Tennessee. I don't know. There's obviously a lack of communication between that linebacker and the cornerback, because the corner's following him. And in theory, though, it's cover 2. Like he should have that flat. And so the linebacker's never going to get over the top of that. It's a big hit right away. But we saw a lot of this use of motion as well. And then they, later in the game, they showed this kind of like Henderson quick out motion and then come back to run counter, which they ran a lot of, as we'll discuss. But again, right away, you see them like, we know we're going to get a lot of probably quarter half after what happened against Michigan. But this time we have answers ready to go for it.
All right. Another thing that is always an answer is, what if you just threw the ball to Jeremiah Smith? And so this is one of those plays where that worked out really well. Just a nice RPO play, very short pass, very nice yards after catch run by Jeremiah Smith on this next one.
Yeah. And so again, I think that this game plan at a bigger level was, particularly in the passing game and the RPO game, much more vintage Ryan Day. It felt to me like, at least particularly with the passing game, that Day had a bigger role in terms of attack, particularly like attacking split safety coverages vertically. But then also some of these RPO concepts, like this is something that used to wear out with Marvin Harrison Jr. And it's been a little bit missing lately. But they ran this slide RPO. They ran it to Jeremiah Smith here. They ran it to Emeka Egbuka. They ran it one time to TreVeyon Henderson from split back. So a lot of this slide, because Tennessee really wasn't playing the backside. They were attacking the front side of the run. A lot of times they would actually like have the defensive end loop into the A gap to expecting Ohio State's base inside zone game, which they did not get much of. But so this is just an easy way, to stress coverage. Like this is a cover 3. But it's also just like getting Jeremiah Smith the ball, right? Like it's a nice design also because Jeremiah Smith's up on the line of scrimmage. So usually you expect this kind of route to go to either someone off the line of scrimmage, right? But he comes from on the line. So it's difficult obviously for Tennessee to adjust, but like looking for different ways to get in the ball. Like as we talked about post Michigan, like don't just always use him as the vertical option. And so here we have early on, like getting him this slide RPO in the flat. This just basically replaces, like you can see the defensive end attack Will Howard. It's just another way to essentially run, the backside's constraint of a zone read play. But it gets him the ball in space. So again, like this is just another example of, I think, both Ryan Day's influence on this game plan and sort of getting back to what, you can always say like, where was all this stuff? Like, we'll be saying that 20 years from now. But the good news is, right, that they saw the same thing that all the points that I was making post Michigan game, like, I'm not saying I had like exclusively knew this. A lot of people did. They picked up the same things too. And so you saw them early, getting back to what works, both in terms of, Ryan Day's new mantra of maximizing your strengths, but also just like schematically what attacks some of the things that they had issues with.
Well, one thing that Tennessee had issues with was every once in a while they got trapped in some real bad matchups. There was one where they had a linebacker covering Jeremiah Smith, and that was the one where the TV ref basically had a conniption that they didn't call pass interference. It ended up being the interception on what could have made it 28-0. This was another one where it looked like Ohio State was able to use their formation, do something a little unusual with their formation, and create a mismatch that led to a really long completion to Emeka Egbuka down the middle.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing, right? Ohio State was creating explosive. So like opening drive, obviously hit Jeremiah Smith against like the cover 3 corner, the little double move. And now you get back like right here. This is schemed up again. Like to me, this is classic day. 4 verticals been sort of missing. We like talked about how the passing game is a little bit too, mirrored concepts, a lot of short intermediate stuff. Here they're attacking split coverages vertically down the field again. And like, I sound like a broken record, like against Michigan, this would have been helpful to attack those split safeties of the Mecca Buka down the seam. And, but yeah, so again, here we go. The same open trips look with G Scott to the bottom. So again, Tennessee's trying to play a similar coverage where they're, playing some type of, it almost looks like a bust a little bit, but maybe like some kind of cover 4, cover 2 to the trips. They're trying to get that backside safety to help, but it just, as I said, like they tried to come out with the split safety concept and Ohio State just threw it all over them doing that because they knew where the holes were to exploit and they attacked them right away. And about after this drive, Tennessee much more went back to running a lot more of their cover 3 concepts, which then Ohio State in turn attacked that successfully, which we'll get to. But these are the kind of routes, split safeties attacked on the seam. I agree with you. Like even on that interception, that was, cover 2 with the linebacker trying to carry Jeremiah Smith down the field. I mean, that was the equivalent of the, tough Borland on, Devontae Smith situation. So that was the right throw. Like kind of, as you said, between the pass interference and, pretty miraculous interception. Sometimes the right decision doesn't have a good outcome, but it was the right choice. So these, right away, they were attacking these split safety coverages vertically down the seam.
All right, you talked about the use of counter being effective for Ohio State, especially on the ground. This is a great example of counter being very effective for Ohio State on the ground. This was the long Travion Henderson touchdown run that made it. I think this was what made it 35-10. I don't know, Ross. There were a lot of touchdowns. Things went pretty well for Ohio State on offense on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, this is the only running play I included because there's so many other things I wanted to talk about. But I could have clipped 20, 25 plays because there was a lot of great stuff going on, obviously, and interesting things. But this is by far the most that Ohio State's ever run counter under at least under Day or even Urban Meyer. I mean, you'd probably have to go back to Jim Tressel maybe in terms of use of gap schemes, right? And so they probably ran counter at least 12 to 15 times in this game. I think on Blue Sky during the game used an earthier term for my excitement over watching the amount of counter that they were using. But they dressed it up and ran it all kinds of ways, right? So another thing they did, like a lot of motion. So they run this orbit motion. All game Tennessee was just kind of pushing towards the motion. So you now again have a backside RPO to Emeka Buka to protect the play. But the linebacker widens with it. And here they're going to run same GH, same side counter. So you can see more from the end zone angle, but gap scheme, unlike zone where you're everyone's stepping front side doubling and you're creating creases for the back gap. You're trying to block down and kick out to aim for a certain gap, right? And so, you get with GH counter, the backside guard and tight end pull and kick and lead. And here you're running by same side. I mean, so they're running it to the side of the running back. And so, one cut, Travion Henderson here. So you get a great down block from Luke Montgomery in his first significant appearance for Ohio State, who drives and pancakes the nose guard. And Tennessee doesn't close down the initial hole, but Henderson, for Travion Henderson too, this kind of gap heavy run scheme fits him much better than he ever was as like a stretch zone runner. I think he's always been at his best when he can get his shoulders going north-south and make one cut and go. And obviously he's explosive once he gets in the open field. So this is a great jump cut. Tennessee overplaying to the front side. He makes a safety miss and a touchdown. But, on the run game in general, as I said, so they ran counter a lot of different ways, right? So they ran this GH counter different ways. They also ran GT counter, which is you're pulling the guard and the backside tackle. You saw them run it off of like the spinner series where they'd bring in Quinshon Judkins and they'd like fake the orbit motion end around and then come back. And, by spinner, I mean, Will Howard's literally turning his shoulders to the offense or the defense and handing it back the other way. And so you got a lot of different ways to dress up counter. They use that, as I said, that like little quick motion out with Henderson faking the pass and coming back. But then really in the run game, I mean, the second half was Chip Kelly really kind of got in his bag and got things going. As I said, I didn't clip them, but if you go back and like look at those last 2 touchdown drives, they ran a lot of quarterback runs game we talked about, right? So like you saw Q power a couple of times where like they would run power for Will Howard, power read. They ran the pause option one time. They had that nice little play where they, to protect power again, they ran the offensive line block GT counter, but then Will Howard flipped it out to Quinshon Judkins on like a little backside sweep for a big play. Then they bootlegged and used play action off of it. So just again, like when we're talking about like, I think the ideal coming into the season, right, was like you're meshing Ryan Day's passing concepts with Chip Kelly's run game, diversity and way to dress things up. And I think this game was probably the best we've seen of that like marriage. I again, as I said, it like to me, it looked like Day had a heavier hand in the passing game, particularly in terms of using like concepts vertically to attack different coverages, but then really got the run game going by really mixing it up, mixing in diversity, dressing things up, using motion, using RPOs and reads to constrain the defense. They ran like a double arc zone read to Will Howard. So you just really saw a lot of diversity, particularly once they had a lead. And, so they weren't trying to, again, play super fast in the third quarter, but also wanted to, continue to move the football and saw a lot of different types of running plays to do so.
All right, so there's your one running play. Have to run the ball, run the damn ball. They did. All right, so we talked about one of them. Now we can get back to the passing game, which is where a bunch of the exciting stuff happens. That's where Jeremiah Smith lives. And this is one where, you talk about taking, finding easy ways to convert stuff. This is one where Jeremiah Smith on crossing routes feels like about the easiest money there is in college football right now.
Yeah, and it's again, it was one of those things like you need to get back to using Jeremiah Smith on not just vertical stem routes, like get him on shallow crosses, and they did that a lot this game. And so as I said, like Tennessee got pretty much chased out of their split safety stuff. I mean, they ran it, but it wasn't like what they were doing every down. And so then Day and Kelly got to their man coverage, cover 3 beaters. One of those a lot was like shallow cross variations to Jeremiah Smith, particularly like on this, I think this was like 3rd and 3 or 4. They ran it on 4th down that one time. So this is like a drive concept. And by that, I just mean like the inner receiver, Emeka Egbuka, is pushing more to like a vertical dig route and Jeremiah Smith comes underneath it. And here it's man coverage. So he's just running away from the coverage. This again, there's back to that open trips formation again, as you'll note, with G. Scott to the bottom by himself. So again, you got Egbuka and Smith next to each other. And, Tennessee was just never really able to handle that formational look. And so, again, as I said, like when I say Day's influence, like this is, particularly like the second half of last year, like they used Marvin Harrison a ton on like, we're not going to just push the ball downfield to him. We're going to use him on shallow crosses. We're going to use him on those slide RPOs. And so you sort of saw the 2023 Marvin Harrison game plan for Smith on Saturday, different ways to get him the ball. And like, yeah, as you said, like, I mean, obviously he's great tracking the ball downfield, but he's a really good runner with the ball in his hands. I mean, like on that 4th down play, he sort of gave that little stutter juke that he was pretty excited about. So there's no need to just use him as a deep threat. Like he's pretty versatile.
And, Ohio State was pretty versatile on offense on Saturday because, they had all this success with the run, but some of the ways that they typically use the run ended up setting them up for success in the passing game. We've talked about the crack toss a bunch this year, and this is one where you fake the crack toss, and that opens stuff up potentially downfield. This was the long completion to G. Scott where the ball kind of came out when he hit the sideline.
Yeah, this is, again, I thought it was a much better job as well of using play action on Saturday compared to the last outing. But again, once we got to these more like single high concepts, like here, I think this is a 3 cloud, which just means that, 3 deep safeties and then one of the corners is one of the underneath defenders. Like this is another Ryan Day staple, sail routes. And they ran this 3 or 4 different ways as well against single high coverage. So like here he hit G. Scott, he hit Emeka Egbuka on one, he hit Cardinal Tate on one. Like Will Howard throws this pass really well. And all you're doing basically, right, is like to the bottom of the screen, you're running off that cover 3 corner who's got the deep third. and then just bringing the second, inside receiver on a deep out route underneath him. And then you also have a running back to the flat. So you're like creating 3 levels to the sideline. But again, so these are just like, it was sort of Ryan Day staples, we're going to hit them with like 3 and 4 verts, and attack the seam if they're split safeties. And then once they got into single high, like we're going to use sail a lot. We're going to use shallow cross concepts a lot. But just much more of successfully pushing the football vertically, not just trying to like, again, not to beat a dead horse, but throw, mirrored curl routes or out routes, really more attacking the coverage downfield.
Well, you talked earlier about the fact that they don't just need to send Jeremiah Smith deep and they can run short stuff. And that's true. It all worked great. The short stuff, the medium stuff. They can still send him deep and it still does work. So let's talk about that second Jeremiah Smith touchdown.
Yeah, this was when I saw this live. I was like, I've been calling for this for half a year at least. So I was pretty excited to see it. This is just an RPO, right? And so this is just, but it's an RPO with a go route. And so like, as opposed to like running a soft hitch, to that side with or a hitch against soft coverage, here you have pressed up coverage. And, in theory, you have a safety to help there, but he's never going to get there. And so this is, again, another counter play, GH counter, but Howard's just going to pull it when he sees that pressed up coverage and throw the go route. So he's just reading that corner. He sees press coverage. He pulls and throws. Obviously, a great ball, great catch. But this is, again, the kind of thing, like, if you want to press Jeremiah Smith without help, like, this is how you need to punish teams who are going to not roll coverage to him. So this was sort of the cherry on top, so to speak, of the offensive game plan from Saturday night, that bringing it all together here with being able to create explosives when teams are not sufficiently worried about Jeremiah Smith.
All right, so there you go. I think the first ever 100% positive show that we've ever done with Ross, especially on the offensive side of the ball. We may have a close to 100% positive show on the defensive side of the ball. The only way to find out is to tune into tomorrow's show. Or if you want to find out sooner, you can become a member of BuckeyeHuddle.com, because we always post these early on our Huddle board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus. Let our members get a look at these sometimes multiple days before they go live on YouTube for everyone else. Boy, this is going to be a busy week. So, if you want to get an early access to that, you can sign up today at BuckeyeHuddle.com, $4.99 for your first month. There's plenty of other good stuff there on the Huddle board as well. Plenty of recruiting talk and transfer portal talk and all sorts of good stuff there. So hope to see you there. We also hope to see you at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. That's where we're going to have all sorts of coverage from Pasadena this week. Tony, Kevin, and I getting ready to head out to California in just a couple of days. Going to be a very busy but very exciting week, all ending with what should be one heck of a football game in my absolute favorite place on earth to watch a football game, the Rose Bowl. Again, if you have not booked your tickets yet and you're thinking like, should I go? Maybe I can get late. Let's go. Just do it. Go. You should do it. It is fantastic. It's the best place on earth to watch a football game. You should do it. You should also make sure you join us at BuckeyeHuddle.com as well. And thanks again to our friends at Jeff Ruby's Columbus, the award-winning upscale steakhouse in downtown Columbus, named one of the top 50 steakhouses in America by Food Network. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus to check out the menu and make a reservation today. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.